Ray from Houston, Texas. The idea of giving public comment is really important. We always have to look for ways that the regular public can be engaged in the process. And so the idea of giving public comment is one of those ways. And we can do it in a number of ways. Most federal agencies or new laws, a lot of things have public comment periods. Unfortunately, they're published in something called the Federal Register and things like that that most people don't always see, where you can give written comment to a proposed rule or something. So that's one way, and it's a good way to comment, but it's not always accessible to everyone. Another type of public comment is giving testimony at a public hearing, whether a city council or a legislative session, pardon me. And doing that is a really good way to, it's a much more accessible way in some ways. It's a scary way. Sometimes it's better to prepare it and put it in writing. You usually are limited by the amount of time that you have to give testimony, but it gives you an opportunity to put something in writing that you want to say as well, even though you may be limited in time, that you can leave with the legislators and have it be on public record. And that's really key, so that other people can go see it and others might use what you have said. So public comment is a really viable way to get entry into the public policy decision-making process. So I guess one of the key times that I have given public comment was in the 2015 Texas legislative session, and we found out at rather late notice that one of the committees was going to be hearing a bill that had implications for people living with HIV and could really result in HIV criminalization. And I spent the weekend trying to type my words out and time them down so that I could get my words out in the time that was going to be allotted. When you give public comment, you need to get wherever you got to get early. You typically have to sign in, so it is not a quick process. I think sometimes the process is designed to cancel you out, because if you can't wait and sit and be patient, you may not have a chance to do it. So I went to Austin and signed up and waited my turn in front of this legislative committee, and ended up being the last one to give testimony, which was really good for me because I got to hear all the other testimony, and I happened to be the only person giving testimony who was a person living with HIV. And so even though it wasn't part of my script, I started out by saying, I'm the only one here with skin in the game. And I went in to give read my public comment, telling the position of what I felt was the 85,000 people living in Texas with HIV, that the law would impact our right to privacy, the unintended consequences that it would have, and asking them to rethink that. Because it was personal, I was pretty passionate, and the whole chamber went quiet listening to me. And that's why I think public personal testimony is really impactful, and it resulted in them deciding not to vote on the bill that day. They later did vote on it, but for myself, it was a way to organize others, and we eventually got other people to give testimony as well. And so we were able, it was interesting, we started with my testimony that year. It was March of 2015, and we ended up galvanizing into community action across the country, in Texas and other places, through helps of other advocates, and put pressure, and the bill was eventually killed, and it was not passed. And so it was a successful advocacy effort, starting with my testimony that day, shaking like a leaf, but realizing that the other people that were testifying in support of this bill, and there was no one in opposition and no one testifying who was actually living with HIV or having skin in the game. Still tried. This committee still did pass it, so let me say that that committee came back and passed it, and it went to the House because it started out in the Senate, and it was where they played a lot of tricks, and we have to really be vigilant when we're dealing with the legislature, because even though they didn't vote on it that day, I went and visited with all those legislators in that committee, and we thought that they was going to be killed, but the chair of that committee brought that bill back up and made a statement that they had attempted to work with the HIV community and couldn't resolve their issues, which was not true. And they passed it. It went to the House. We lobbied the committee in the House and to get them not to pass it. They end up suspending the public notice rule that allowed them to have a public hearing without testimony, so we were not able to testify in the House. But because we had really engaged legislators and others, we were able to defeat it on a procedural rule because it wasn't heard before midnight on a night, because one of the legislators who we had gained support, who was part of the calendar committee, put it so low on the calendar it was not heard by midnight. So my testimony may have started the fight, but we still had to engage and continue the fight beyond that, and it ended up being one of our champions, who is a covert champion, who is not publicly open that they are a supporter of the HIV community, that was able to, in effect, help us defeat it on a procedural rule basis. But
really
the testimony, all that was needed to bring attention, and all cases won't be like that where they play dirty and suspend the public notice rules and things like that. But public comment is our way of engaging in the decision-making process.
Great.
If someone wanted to give public comment, or verbal or written public comment, excuse me, and didn't want to share, disclose their own status, they could do it in the form of telling the story of a friend. They could do it in the form of just telling it as a story of a family member or someone you know, or being an ally to the HIV community. Clearly personal has an impact, but to give a personal story still has an impact, even if it's not your story, or if it's not in your name, but still your story. So, and then I also think other folks would take your story to them. When we have went to legislators and people who couldn't be there, we were able to take letters from them, and what they're documenting their stories of why they supported or opposed a particular cause as well. So when we turn in our comment, we can turn in letters from other people as well.